Yo, what's going on, guys? GZTV. We are here with Quentin Tarantino's take on a gangster film, Reservoir Dogs. You know, you have Tim Roth, Steve Buscemi. I can't seem to name any of the other guys, but yeah, it's a gangster film from 1992. It is a very critically acclaimed movie. I've seen a lot of good things about it, and I watched it, and I would say they're pretty accurate. I mean, this is a pretty good film, as simple and compact as it is. I like it. There's a lot of really cool, interesting things interwoven. So, 8 gangsters eat breakfast at a Los Angeles diner. All but the boss, Joe Cobbett, and his son, underboss, nice guy Eddie Cabot, use aliases: Mr. Brown, Mr. White, Mr. Blonde, Mr. Blue, Mr. Orange, and Mr. Pink. Obviously, so if they know each other's names, then they could easily get caught by the police. But yeah, the boss, the gangster boss, usually uses his real name. I'm not sure if that's something that's popular in gangster films. I don't think it was used in like Goodfellas. But after Mr. Brown finishes rambling about the Madonna song "Like a Virgin," the group argues about Mr. Pink's policy of not tipping, and it's like this whole thing. It's like kind of insane. Like the conversation takes like 5 to 10 minutes, and I like the attention to detail by Quentin Tarantino throughout this film to really like put emphasis on some of the most random things. Like I think it's really cool. The gangsters carry out a diamond heist off screen. And this movie pretty much deals with the aftermath of that rather than the actual action of doing it, which is interesting because usually in a gangster movie you'd want to see the action, but this is more of like the drama aspect of being a gangster. Mr. White is then shown fleeing with Mr. Orange, who was shot during the escape and is bleeding severely in the back of Mr. White's car. At one of Joe's warehouses, where it's like a getaway location, Mr. White and Mr. Orange rendezvous with Mr. Pink, who believes that the job was a setup and that the police were waiting for them. Yeah, like he was kind of observing the scene and was like, wow, it seems like someone set us up here, you know? Mr. White informs him that Mr. Brown is dead, Mr. Blue and Mr. Blonde are missing, and Mr. Blonde murdered several civilians during the heist, which that was never their intent, never their goal. They just wanted to get the diamonds and get out. Mr. White is furious that Joe, his old friend, would employ Mr. Blonde, whom he describes as a psychopath. And Tarantino actually plays a character in this story. I can't remember which one, but yeah, I think it might be a side character. I can't tell. I couldn't tell you. I don't remember. Mr. Pink has hidden the diamonds nearby and argues with Mr. White over whether to get medical attention for Mr. Orange, and the pair draw guns at each other like, are we going to take this guy to the hospital and like reveal our names and all that stuff? Because we're not going to tell them, oh, this is Mr. Orange. They're not going to believe us, right? We're going to have to give them our actual names, and they're not going to be able to find identification, and it's just a big decision. There's a lot of like decisions they argue over throughout the film and stuff, you know? They stand down when Mr. Blonde arrives with a kidnapped policeman, Marvin Nash. Sometime earlier, Mr. Blonde meets with the Cabots, having completed a 4-year jail sentence, and he's kind of like the taller guy, I think, in the middle of the movie poster there. I think that's him. That's such a fire movie poster. Like, yeah. So they pretty much, like, throughout the film, while they're at this warehouse, I mean, the movie mainly takes place at this single warehouse, which is kind of crazy, and it's so cool, like, the improvisation by Quentin Tarantino. I think that's really what he wanted to show with this film, that he could take anything and just run with it, you know? And throughout, as they're at the warehouse, they're showing all the origin films, like the before the robberies of a lot of the characters. So to reward Mr. Blonde for not having given Joe's name to the authorities for a lighter sentence, they offer him a no-show job. Mr. Blonde is grateful, but insists that he wants to get back to real work, and they recruit him for the heist. So yeah, that's kind of where that came about. In the present, Mr. White and Mr. Pink beat Nash for information. Like, do you know who the snitch is? Like, who ratted us out? Eddie arrives and orders them to retrieve the diamonds and ditch the getaway vehicles, leaving Mr. Blonde in charge of Nash and Mr. Orange. So White is supposed to be going with Eddie and all them to get the diamonds and get everything away from this building so the police don't suspect anything. Eddie is the boss's son. Nash denies knowledge, but Mr. Blonde ignores him and resumes the torture, cutting off Nash's ear with a straight razor, which is kind of crazy, one of the more crazier scenes in the entire movie. He prepares to set him on fire, but Mr. Orange shoots Mr. Blonde dead. And yeah, so one of the gangsters for sure dies, and Mr. Orange is actually still dying right now. Mr. Orange reveals to Nash that he is an undercover police officer named Freddie Newendike, which Nash is already aware of, and that the police will arrive when Joe comes to the warehouse. So yeah, he is their rat. Mr. Pink had every reason, or Steve Buscemi's character had every reason to be suspicious of Mr. Orange. He reveals that he's the rat. When Eddie, Mr. Pink, and Mr. White return, Mr. Orange tries to convince them that Mr. Blonde planned to kill them all and steal the diamonds for himself. Wow, I'm just like reading my notes here, and there's so many fucking misters in this story. Eddie impulsively kills Nash and accuses Mr. Orange of lying, since Mr. Blonde was loyal to his father. So now the police officer's dead, and now we're left with Eddie, Mr. Pink, Mr. White, and Mr. Orange. That's pretty much who's in the building right now. This is a pretty concise film. It's under an hour 40. So, I mean, this isn't going to be a long video or anything. Like, Mr. Blonde would never do that to our crew. You know, he really liked my father, is what Eddie is saying pretty much. And he would never, like, do that. He is about to execute Mr. Orange, who he suspects. Well, Joe arrives with news that the police have killed Mr. Blue, so now we know that Mr. Blue is dead, and now the only people left in the gang is everyone that's at the warehouse. He is about to execute Mr. Orange, who he suspects is the traitor behind the setup, which he is right. But Mr. White intervenes and holds Joe at gunpoint, insisting that Mr. Orange is not a police officer, and Mr. White is pretty much defending Mr. Orange throughout the movie with his life. Like, he truly believes this guy is innocent. He got shot. Why would he get shot, you know? Eddie aims his gun at Mr. White, creating a Mexican standoff, which is pretty much like, when it's like a chain of gunpoints, like, this guy's firing at him, but this guy's firing at you. It's like, it's pretty iconic. All three fire, both Cabots are killed, and Mr. White and Mr. Orange are hit. So now, Mr. White and Mr. Orange are the only ones left alive on the scene. Well, Mr. Pink, too. I forgot. Mr. Pink, the only uninjured person, takes the diamonds and flees, but is apprehended by the police outside. And nobody realized that besides, you know, Mr. Orange, no one realized but him that the police would be outside. As Mr. White cradles the dying Mr. Orange in his arms, Mr. Orange confesses that he is in fact a police officer. He in fact set this up. He finally lets him know because he knows he's about to die soon. Mr. White presses his gun to Mr. Orange's head like, you fucking traitor, you know. The police storm the warehouse and order Mr. White to drop his gun. He fires the gun instead, then more gunshots sound, and Mr. White collapses, pretty much leaving the rat, Mr. Pink, who's probably in jail, and the police officers. So, yeah, that's pretty much the movie. I'm going to talk about what people thought, you know, kind of give you guys my own thoughts, and then that's going to be the video. This is not going to be a long video. This movie was an hour 38, like, to be exact. And, yeah, I got everything I needed out of that time, too. This is an important and influential milestone of independent filmmaking. 90%, 76 reviews, 8.9 out of 10 on Rotten Tomatoes. Thrumming with intelligence and energy, Reservoir Dogs opens Quentin Tarantino's filmmaking career with hard-hitting style. So yeah, apparently this was Tarantino's first film. 8.1 out of 10 on Metacritic with 24 critics. Universal acclaim. People love this movie. This is one of the best independent movies ever made, if not the best. It got released at the Sundance Film Festival. The effect of Reservoir Dogs was kind of like the 1895 film La Arrivée d'un Train de Gare de la Ciotat, which people are kind of like comparing it to for some reason. Audiences supposedly saw a moving train approaching the camera and ducked, which is like in that movie. The Reservoir Dogs had a similar effect, and people were not ready for this movie. You know, the cast, the usage of nonlinear storytelling, it was all just amazing. It was revolutionary. You know, Tarantino's directing, you know, the fact that he did not often use close-ups in the film was cool too. A lot of zoomed out shots, which is new. Oh, like, kind of new, really. The film was awesome. I mean, the acting, Steve Buscemi, Tierney, Madsen were kind of the highlights. Tarantino's palpable enthusiasm, his unapologetic passion for what he's created, reinvigorates this venerable plot, and mayhem aside, makes it involving for longer than you might suspect. Um, the cast, Tarantino's dialogue writing abilities is just crazy. I mean, Tarantino did this movie damn near by himself. Um, the cast, the film, like it has this like deadpan sense of humor, kind of, and it's great. That kind of is like normal for a gangster movie. Roger Ebert is a hard ass. The script could have been better. The film feels like it's going to be terrific, but Tarantino's script does not have much curiosity about the characters, which is what he said. Tarantino has an idea and trusts the idea to drive the plot. 2.5 out of 4 for Ebert. It's a good film from a talented director, and it's enjoyable. He liked what he saw, but he wanted more. Maybe if the film was longer, I guess that could be like a flaw with the movie. The strong violence and language, obviously, like the Karens are out there. The ear-cutting scene people found unnerving. Madsen himself reportedly had great difficulty finishing it, especially after Kirk Boutz ad-libbed the desperate plea, "I've got a little kid at home." Wait, what? Many people walked out during the film? I mean, what? Y'all have never seen a gory movie? Like, was that new in '92? I don't know, man. During a screening at Sitka's Film Festival, 15 people walked out, including horror film director Wes Craven and special makeup effects artist Rick Baker. Wes Craven walked out of the... What? Okay, man. Baker, the walkout was a compliment. He later told Tarantino to take the walkout as a compliment and explained that he found the violence unnerving because of its heightened sense of realism. Like, thank the special effects crew. It happens at every single screening. For some people, the violence or the rudeness of the language is a mountain they can't climb. That's okay. It's not their cup of tea, but Tarantino is affecting them. He wants that scene to be disturbing, and obviously that accomplished his goal. I'm not going to get into the analysis or anything. I think that's good for the video. This is a pretty good movie. Very simple gangster film. If you want a nice little concise short watch and you're into gangster films and you haven't watched this, I would go ahead. This is a pretty good entryway film to gangster films. I mean, my entryway was Goodfellas. I hope to continue to watch these in the future. I'm definitely trying to get into the Godfather series, although the movies are like 3 hours long. So like, I got to find a way to get myself into that. But I gotta go to work here in not too long, so I'm gonna go ahead, go eat some lunch, get ready, do all that stuff, and I will probably see you guys